fantasy orchestral theme with heroic brass and drums, the knights rise in the direction of power. They shout at seeing the emperor who brought the invaders to their knees. The emperor who crushed the traitors, they shout in praise. They shout that their emperor is the one who defeated the infidels. They are the great defenders of their faith. The knights raise their arms in joy and shout that they crossed oceans, mountains, and deserts, and conquered 3 continents. There is a majestic silhouette on a horse on the side of the mountain. The knights keep shouting that they are the great heroes of Lemuria. Fantasy epic orchestral music with sweeting strings and bold brass. This nobleman's name is Hercules, the supreme emperor of the 3 continents, the emperor of divine light. This is Hercules' eye. Hercules proudly lifts his sword while listening to the praises of his subordinates. There was once an emperor who turned the threatened Lemurian Empire into a great power encompassing 3 continents. Hercules' story starts early. In the territory of Lemuria, Hercules runs hysterical, shouting that this will not happen. He shouts, riding, who never wants to be emperor. Hercules is the 3rd prince of the weak and dying empire of Lemuria. Because of the death of his father, the late Emperor Hadrian III, the post of emperor became vacant. Initially, he should not have been admitted as heir to the throne. Epic fantasy background music. But since his 2 older brothers were very rude and did not fit in the role of heirs, now he is forced to take the place of the next emperor. The idea of being emperor of a small country, and weak, indeed, of a great country, is more unbearable to him than any punishment. Hercules is angry that, because of his useless brothers, he is now forced to become the emperor of the country. He shouts that he wants to live a quiet and hasty life for the rest of his days. Interior tension music after him. The girl asks Hercules not to be so selfish. Hercules recognizes that voice and realizes he's already been called. It's Caroline. She's your childhood friend and used to always keep an eye on him. Hercules is angry. He never thought she'd get this far just to catch him. Caroline reads after him and asks why he's running away, and he asks if she's still running after him. Caroline says, of course, if she doesn't run after him, she won't catch him. She screams at him to stop running and become an emperor. He, angry, asks if she's joking. He will not become the emperor of a weak and empty country that will soon be destroyed. Heroic fantasy music with rhythmic drums and strings. At some point, Caroline reaches out and grabs him from the back of the head. She pulls him abruptly, causing Hercules to get off his horse and fall to the ground. He doesn't have time to calm down or open his eyes, while Caroline falls on him and proudly tells him, "You got him." Hercules just squeezes his teeth with rage and looks at her with resentment. Previously, the Lemurian Empire had a territory stretching over 3 continents and was the world's largest military, economic, and cultural power, leaving its mark on the world. This empire was built by elves, priests, powerful women, all elves. However, this country, which once proclaimed to be the most powerful state in the world, was divided by a civil war in the east and west, and the western half of the country was destroyed. The epic orchestral theme, the Eastern Lemurian Empire, also continues to decline due to invasions of various races. Hercules strongly reflects that a territory that has lost 60% of its possessions and is still in decline, and the trade of a country that is deprived of many grainlands and access to the sea becomes almost impossible. He thinks maybe that's the reason. Right now, an old man approaches the boys in the field and asks how they are. Young people understand that he is the 19th emperor of the Lemurian Empire, Adrian III. They bow to him and say everything is going well, thanks to tireless efforts. He says if all goes well, the country will not starve this year, celebrate it and apologize to the common people. They turn to Hercules, the little one next to them, and ask how he is, because they live in very large lands, and they will decide how this country will develop in the future. Hercules doesn't answer anything and reads a book sitting down. He says to follow him, but he doesn't obey. He approaches him and says he's going to take a tour of these lands and that he can finish reading the book later. Hercules lifts his head, looks around, and he starts reading again, saying it's just a wheat field, so he better read a book. Take his book and say that whoever wrote this book saw the world as it is, and that book captures this world. He says that just reading a book, he will not be able to experience the same emotions as in real life. Hercules pouts with those words. Hercules looks around and sees two people working. He asks his father what that is, explains that they harvest the wheat from the ears to make bread with these grains that they eat. He realizes their hands are getting tired of the sickle. And you think it sounds uncomfortable to use. Hercules points to others and asks his father, how about using something like a comb instead of sticks? You don't know what the combs have to do with it. In the end, everyone tries to do the same. The workers say it's so easy and their hands don't get tired. The little girl says she can grind several ears at once. Hercules explains that instead of relying on the strength of one hand, the fruit is much easier to pull with both hands while trusting its own weight. And if they make a small platform, even small children can do that. Hercules says it'll save a lot of effort and increase their productivity a lot. His father says it's great. Ask him how he knew that. And he replies that they have existed since the Edo period, created by farmers who were creating various innovative tools at the time. Hercules is silent without knowing how to justify himself with him. Now he says he read about it in a foreign book. Your father says with pride that your son is a know-it-all. Hercules thinks to himself that this thing doesn't exist in the library and in their files. Hercules has his own secretary. He has more advanced knowledge of science and technology, which he keeps secret. People usually call him a child prodigy, and his father gave him everything he asked for. But it is precisely through this knowledge that he loses his freedom and is overrated. Returning to real time, Caroline demands that he finally become emperor. Hercules looks while Caroline puts her hand in her stomach. Start blushing and ask her to leave first. Because she's heavy, Caroline says, if she leaves. Hell, run away again. She starts saying she feels something solid underneath. So Hercules, in panic and hysteria, starts screaming loudly. Caroline tries to persuade him again and asks him to become emperor. He has the knowledge and skills to become emperor. He refuses again and shouts that he will never be emperor. Hercules, sweating, says he wants to travel when he grows up. That's why he's just accumulating knowledge now. He will not become a servant of this country. In demanding that she come down, he firmly declares that he will not allow the prince of his freedom to be deprived by the emperor. She asks, does that really mean he doesn't want to be with her? Hercules thinks of it and watches it with doubt. Caroline says she loves and wants to protect the country where her father, Emperor Hadrian, ruled. And she always wanted to see the new Lemurian Empire created by Hercules. She starts crying bitterly and says she wants to see Hercules become emperor. He suddenly gets up scared and panics and asks why she's crying. She tries to say something and releases a hiccup. Hercules overcomes himself and swallows the crying. Humbly, he tells you he's taking Caroline on a trip with him. She calms down and asks if it's true. He caresses her head, answers that it's true. Hell do anything for whatever she wants. She asks if Hell let her read a book about martial arts, which her mother forbade. He tells her to read. She asks if Hell come for tea. He responds hastily that he does. She asks if he would become emperor, and he answers without thinking so. There's a silence. Hercules looks at her, and she looks at him expectant. There's no tears. She suddenly grabs him by the neck and drags him. He screams, spreading on the floor. What's she doing? Caroline turns around and says a warrior must use any weapon to win. That's what Hercules' father said. He calls it plain, and horrified, shouts to all the forest that she deceived him. Thus, in the presence of many of his subjects, he safely ascended the throne and became emperor. Hercules sits on the throne, snaps his fingers and pulls his crown, saying it sucks to be trapped in such a country. It reflects aloud on the ongoing trade deficit, the territory that continues to shrink due to the invasion of other races, and so the nation continues to lose its territorial viability. He can't believe his father died ruling a country like this. You say with despair that your freedom lasted so little. And now, his imperial life has begun. Suddenly, a dark, foggy hand appears behind him, and then all the silhouette of a woman with long hair floating in the air. She claims she has already told him that he is destined to become emperor. She gave him a lot of knowledge about the world of others, so she expects him to succeed. That's it. He has much knowledge of another world, but which originally did not belong to him. The person who possesses this knowledge was born and raised on planet Earth in a country called Japan. I think his name is a wage earner. In short, all the problems that have arisen so far, he managed to solve it only because he has knowledge of another world. The reason for all this is the work of this bizarre demon. Her clothes are covered in blood. She has long dark hair and a sly smile. He asks her if she has any idea how long she's had a headache about it. In another life, he was such a boring, stupid person. But even so, knowledge is certainly useful. The sorceress tells him she has high hopes for him. She calls him a great future hero and then disappears. Hercules starts screaming nervously, saying he's about to explode in the will to give up. Then another man comes in and with a sigh, tells Hercules that he does not look like a man who has just taken the throne, for this is Christopher Augustus, is Hercules' uncle. Hercules, suspicious, asks if he really is his relative, although he does not look at all like a member of his family. He extends his index finger and questions threateningly, "Anyway, he was the one who suggested this idea to your father." Hercules tells his uncle that although he had two brothers, he placed him above them. He calls him the one who stops him. He says thoughtfully that he doesn't remember doing anything in particular. But Adrian talked a lot about him. Uncles list that Hercules could speak at the age of 2, and by the time he was 3, he could read and write. By the time he was 4, he had read every book in the castle. But that was not enough for him. Hercules covers his ears and asks him to shut up. Besides, my uncle heard he invented senbukaki, thus increasing the efficiency of wheat harvest, and since then, their wheat production has been growing exponentially. Uncle says, smiling, the people, and the former emperor was very pleased anyway. His ascension to the throne, in his opinion, was the right decision. Hercules sighs deeply and says dreamfully, if only they stood up against him. Then a subordinate approaches and turns to Imperial Majesty in panic. Uncle, playing with a smile, says a man has arrived who will revolutionize the atmosphere. Hercules tells him he really sucks at timing. This is Galphus Galanos, Caroline's father. He apologizes to him. Hercules says that from now on, you need to discuss matters related to the administration of the empire together. Hercules covers his ears with his hands because of the noise and comments that he now understands who Caroline inherited. Then a young man comes up from behind and and asks him not to talk like that, because Galfus is always like that. Hercules asks if Lucanus has been here the whole time, and he says it's terrible. Hercules, resigned, says a maternal relative, a military man, and a eunuch are currently in the room. And he himself is a 12-year-old emperor. Hercules stands up and says this country is doomed. He takes the crown and delivers it to them, saying they can continue to do politics on their own and that he will just have fun in the library while everything is going down a bad road. Lucanus says, with an embarrassed smile, that there seems to be nothing they can do. You'll have to trust Lady Caroline again. A little later, Hercules looks dreamy into the window and sighs, saying he was born into a terrible world to become the emperor of a dying country. He remembers the faces of his citizens who beg him to save their countries. He strives, remembering people's noise. He closes the book and says, addressing them, that they are the only one that gives him peace and relaxation. He says aloud that there is much knowledge waiting for him out there, but only they help him to know his true nature. He smiles and says that books are the best companion to get him out of this narrow world. He opens another book in expectation of what kind of world they will offer him today. Then Caroline comes abruptly from the corner and calls him in panic. Hercules gets terrified and yells at the whole library. He hesitates and asks what happened, and she says with displeasure that he's stuck here again. She screams that she heard him because he's avoiding work again. Hercules, resentful, says they told Caroline everything again. Hercules claims that since there are so many people here, he doesn't have to get involved in politics. He reminds her not to push them. He says only the title of emperor is enough for him. Caroline looks at him at altitude and then asks if he knows anything about politics. He gets mad and asks what she just said. Caroline turns around and says it's a shame, even though he's recognized by Adrian. She goes out saying it's a shame. I thought Hercules would be able to solve the country's financial problems in no time. He says he was apparently mistaken. After all, Hercules is only 12. Then Hercules' ears shudder with those words. She keeps saying what her father would think if he heard that. Hercules gets up and asks if she really thinks he's a child. She turns to him and he laughs and says, of course he understands politics, but what did she think? How much does he know about the world? Hercules resentfully says, it will be easier than ever once he fully understands what the problem is. Caroline asks, but he can't do that right now. Hercules gets even more angry and says if she insists, she promises to improve the financial situation. From the empire in 3 years, Caroline looks at him happy. And he puts a condition that, in return, if he really solves all the problems, she will fulfill one of his requests. Carolina thinks a little cheap. Then you agree, saying you'll do what he asks. He says, triumphant, that she agreed to it. This is the story of the difficult journey of the young Emperor Hercules, who used his knowledge to conquer 3 continents. As the Emperor of Divine Light, New Lemuria has changed a lot. It is now better known as the city where 2/3 of the world's wealth is located. The empire accumulated immense wealth with the transport of goods through its territory. The prosperity of the empire, sustained over the years, is supported by the transit trade, helped by its favorable location. However, this traffic trade has 2 disadvantages. The first depends on the political situation and economic conditions of import and export at destination. And the second, in this case, is that all wealth will inevitably pass through a neighboring country. That is, the greatest enemy of the greatest empire, the Kingdom of Skins. Hercules stands before a huge bookshelf, takes one, reads with interest, and then closes it. Drawing conclusions, He says that means that the Lemurian Empire needs to find another source of income, regardless of the traffic trade. Fantasy orchestral theme, all the powerful begin to rejoice, telling Hercules that he is finally motivated. Hercules huffing with anger, but denies nothing. Everyone looks surprised, not realizing it happened to him. Your uncle says happily that he finally made a decision. Now he's the true emperor. The believer speaks with plans that they can prevent the destruction of the Lemurian Empire. Hercules watches them with fatigue and says he hasn't done anything yet. Dad caresses the girl, saying she's doing well, she's happy too, and she agrees. Hercules faces them with hatred. He recalls his words that he would improve the Lemurian Empire in 3 years. Now he thinks how stupid he is, but he realizes there's nothing he can do. The sweat runs down his face, but at the same time he gets flushed. Someone turns to him and asks if it's crazy trying to improve the financial situation in 3 years. Hercules plays the book and says it's possible. Then it starts exporting slightly goods. He says that except for wheat, which is a basic food in the empire, grapes and olives are also cultivated here. They are processed in the major exports of the empire, wine and olive oil. These are the empire's main export and financial resources. He states that all the countries of the world produce these goods, and that the artisanal production of the First Kingdom is not developing worse than that of the Lemurian Empire, because, due to competition with them, they hardly make any profit. Melody with harps and soft flutes, he says, to start rebuilding their finances. You're thinking of creating a special product of Lemuria. Everyone listens with interest. So the maid gets to them. Everyone saw each other. She has cups and a kettle. She takes every cup, spill the liquid, and deliver it to them. Everyone looks at the drink with tension because it's black. They don't want to drink. Hercules easily takes a sip and tells the others not to. Light orchestral fantasy music he was just made. They want to resist and say something. Hercules, smiling, tells them to try soon. Everybody grabs a glass. One of them says loudly, "It smells strange." Before that, everyone smells suspicious. Everyone takes a long, suspicious breath. They take a sip at the same time with calm faces. The man and Caroline make the same face and squirm about the taste and say it's disgusting. And the priest says with a smile, she feels excited and likes it. Caroline asks himself, is this some kind of medicine? It's too bitter for her. Hercules says she understands. He takes Caroline's cup and offers to try it in a different way. It adds milk, carefully stirs. He returns the cup. Caroline looks closer and sees the face of the cat on the surface of the drink, painted with cream. She rejoices to see the cat. Hercules informs others that he added it to their mugs, then let them try again. Everyone tries it together again. Then their faces begin to shine with soft glow. They say it's easier to drink now, but Mother says she liked the previous one better. Fantasy team background music. Caroline turns around and happily says it's very tasty. Hercules smiles and tells everyone, pointing to the cup, that is coffee. They don't understand what kind of coffee that is. Carolina turns to her father and asks if he knew about it. Dad answers honestly that he didn't know, never heard of anything like it. Hercules, he passes his finger over Caroline's leftover foam and says he discovered this drink on the train a few years ago. It was cultivated in the church so that ministers could remain in force for a long time. He says there are few sources of water in this country, and that the water you get is very difficult to drink. Therefore, Lemuria's main drinks are grape wine, and another drink that can be stored for a long time, dark, contemplative melody. If they drink, they get drunk. So the aristocrats who have money drink tea, imported from the East, but it's still very expensive because of the imports. Coffee has no established production methods and, above all, can be grown under climate and soil conditions of Lemuria. It was natural that if they sold it as a special product of the empire, it would attract some attention. Everybody's quiet. The priest just says it's clear to her. Hercules' uncle also answers that he understands everything. You agree that this coffee should be sold as a special product. He turns around and says with displeasure that he is not impressed. Ambient fantasy music he doesn't understand, and asks offensively what that means. He says that just to show them this drink, bought a tea set in one of the silk countries of the East, white porcelain, which technically was created to drink tea and imported. But everyone is shocked by the revelation that it was actually made in Lemuria. The priest says that this is impossible, that this white porcelain is not a patent of the country of the East Silk. Not even the First Kingdoms have this technology, let alone Lemuria. Hercules listens to him and drinks his coffee quietly, saying that this is China bone made in London around the 18th century. K's soft classical music, they don't understand what London is. Hercules ignores and continues, saying that the white color of this porcelain is obtained from animal bones. Hercules explains, what I mean is, until now, all the porcelain we manufactured was black, so I decided to replace it with white. Hercules' uncle thinks actually, it's still in the experiment phase, but the white color is very beautiful, taken by an emotion, pulls and screams that it's already a wonder. Hercules smiles resolutely and declares that coffee and porcelain will be sold as special products of the empire. All, cheerful, agree with him. Caroline says that, thanks to this, there is hope for a slight financial recovery. Your father is enthusiastically invited to start selling porcelain to aristocrats and merchants. Even if it does, the improvement in the financial situation of the empire will take at least 5 years. He understands you need to speed this up to 3 years. He goes to the window, observes the sky and says that now all that remains is to review the administrative documents in the castle. Replay it to a pile of books. Sit down and read one of them, starting to draw on the board using a ruler. Draw everything, sigh tired and drink your coffee to cheer up. 6 months after I started reviewing the documents, he finally finds out the problem. The books, rolls and documents are scattered everywhere, he says, looking at the trend lines in the drawing, as expected. Increased military spending and deterioration in fiscal efficiency are the main obstacles to economic growth. As of suspense music later, he gathers a round table for negotiations. Hercules says he's got a lot of work ahead of him, that everything is ready and you can start now. Apologizing for the sudden encounter, he believes they need to act urgently against the empire. All employees are sitting, confused, wondering if that's really normal, since Hercules is only 12. Hercules drinks his coffee. Caroline gets angry with those who make comments about him. Hercules claims that they will begin then, and draws the attention of the boy next door, saying he has never seen him before. The boy, in panic, replies, "My name is Kroll. Today I'm gonna be responsible." Hercules smiles and asks Kroll to talk about the tax system. He listens and starts explaining. The imperial tax system consists of 6 main types: land tax, head tax, commercial tax, import tax, military tax, emancipation tax for servants. He concludes by adding that they have a monopoly on salt. Hercules thanks and says he's doing well, that he remains in the same spirit. Kroll thinks convulsively that he was praised. Hercules begins to generalize on the aforementioned tax systems. That the head tax, the trader tax, the import, the emancipation of the servants and the salt monopoly must be abolished or revised. At first, everyone freezes their expressions. digesting the information, and then screams, "What do you mean? How are they gonna raise taxes if they cancel everything?" Hercules asks everyone to calm down and promises to explain everything now. First, he talks about the head tax. Hercules explains, "This is a list of information about the people in the empire they collect the head tax from." Hercules asks Kroll to take a look and ask what he thinks. Kroll analyzes and replies, "There are too many women here." Hercules shouts, "That's a point. Besides, there are a lot of people with disabilities here." He claims that the head tax is higher for men than for women, being even lower for people with physical disabilities. These sheets of paper show that a family of 4 men and 2 women can receive tax benefits simply by writing that there are 2 men and 4 women in the family. Someone stands up and says that there are 10 million people in the country, that it is not possible to check the entire population. Hercules agrees, saying that's why, as long as the horses can't check otherwise, people began to attribute to themselves visual and hearing impairments and to escape taxes anyway. Hercules addresses all politicians and asks if they can safely state that this information is correct. Hercules calmly drinks his coffee and says he doesn't need a tax system that doesn't raise properly, so it should be abolished. Everyone's quiet, watching each other. Kroll thinking that's amazing. Those loud bureaucrats are now silent, not saying anything. Hercules turns to Kroll, apologizes for many questions, and asks how the trade tax is charged. He explains, "The tax rate of a trader is calculated on the basis of profit and product type." Hercules asks how Kroll will discover the exact value of his sales profits. The boy, listening, answers, "Your words." Hercules shouts again, "That's it! Here again you can lie." Poor Kroll can barely hold on. Hercules claims that traders can falsify numbers. It is true that trade tax generates significant income, and they must pay what they earn as a national obligation. He explains that, therefore, it will not change the commercial taxation policy, but due to the working time and the number of people involved, they cannot do inspections, so it needs to be reviewed. He keeps reading that the import tax only delays the flow of goods and generates a small revenue for the treasure. Then comes the tax for the deliverance of the servants. Today, servants are no longer exempt. Hercules asks, why is there still this old tax system? He says, both will be abolished. Kroll thinks 4 tax systems have been eliminated or sent for review in the blink of an eye. Hercules looks at the list, and they finally get to the salt monopoly. Hercules mentions that this policy, adopted during the reign of Emperor Hadrian, helped the empire to secure a new source of income, because what they could not raise by the head tax compensated with the sale of salt selling for 30 times the normal value. Hercules explains that salt is necessary to people, so they buy regardless of the price. He then finds something strange here. From behind, the priest's figure appears with a tray that holds a bag. Everyone reacts in panic and horror when they see salt. Hercules claims that salt is not illegal, it is natural salt. And they don't monopolize what it is. Kroll looks, without understanding. And Hercules calls Caroline, asking her to try it. She does, and Hercules asks how she is. She says it's common salt. You think it's better and cheaper than monopolized salt. Hercules claims that this illegal salt is much better than the salt monopolized by the empire. Moreover, it is sold at the imperial table at a reasonably low price. The fact that this salt is being sold on the street shows that he retorts that there is someone pulling the rope sneakily behind. All politicians hide their faces and eyes. Hercules threatens men. If you're not, laughing at the tax system that was left by my father. Then, deadly silence. Kroll questions why the tension suddenly increased. Hercules smiles widely and apologizes. Suddenly, everyone looks at him with shock and perplexity. It says that this system is unstable and bad because it was created only to compensate for the broken tax system, and so they'll cancel it too. Everyone looks at him in horror. Hercules adds that he is willing to ignore the issue of smuggled salt. They're starting to listen to you very carefully. Hercules makes one last condition. Let the merchants form a union. Everyone's looking at questions. And Kroll starts to reflect. Fantasy orchestral music Hercules says that by using traditional methods for traders, it is clear that they falsify the amount of income, and it is impossible to follow exactly what they are doing. If they formed a union, the number of people who would need to do that would be less than the number of people they would have to do. The check income would be reduced, and could make a cross-check between unions and traders, and among other unions. This would allow the government to gain some degree of control over the economy with the help of the unions. Someone says there are concerns that if a union is formed, it will lead to higher prices if they set the price of one thing. Does he not think that this will encourage others to raise prices too, so that they can make a profit? One says that many here believe that trade is a vile business, that money is not earned just by buying, but by making a profit. Hercules says that the government should not simply buy and sell, but think and reflect. Hercules is outraged by the idea that he even makes a living with it. Hercules says that if there are not so many buyers, they just need to unite the merchants to figure out how to sell them. If you just raise the price of something, no one will buy it, and it will rot. He adds that they also know that traders form their own union, although not officially, so he suggests using a favor. Address them as gentlemen, snap your fingers, and says he invented a new tax system and ID, like you, to contribute. Hercules is handing out flyers to everyone. Hercules says that here there are no emperors or bureaucrats at this time. They are just a group of people who want to restore the Lemurian Empire, and those who can do it. Hercules guides everyone who doesn't hesitate to challenge their decision. Everyone is reading the documents intensely and just staying silent. Hercules realizes their reaction and says that, in fact, he believes that they receive little at present. So if they successfully implement tax reforms, he himself will ensure that their wages are fair. Hercules smiles and suggests that everyone should be able to do whatever they want to do. Everyone starts thinking actively and saying they would like to ask something. There are questions, and they would just like to discuss in detail with motivation. A heated debate began in the meeting room, which lasted 3 days and nights. A fantasy theme with lute and drums, and as a result, after numerous improvements and adjustments, a new taxation system was finally created, which was released throughout the empire. And 2 years later, after the development of the new taxation system, the tax revenues of the empire increased by about 1.5 times. And the use of taxes such as the personnel costs of the imperial palace was revised to reduce the costs of the national treasure. Besides, all the riches that were part of the imperial house's heritage, which did not represent historical value, were sold evenly. Thus, the treasure of the Lemurian Empire began to recover safely, and the new emperor Hercules, at the age of only 14, received firm support from merchants who supported national logistics. Hercules was uncompressed in this great achievement. She believes that he will actually be able to solve the financial problems of the empire in less than 3 years. Hercules proudly says he knows it. So why doesn't she give him a caress on the head? She happily reaches out and agrees with it. And then he gets intensely red, turns sideways, and gets nervous. She turns to him and asks if he's sure he wants to go out into the city. If you go to such a crowded place, it will certainly cause noise. Hercules answers that everything is fine, because to Caroline he is still the same Hercules as ever, and in the eyes of the rest of the world, he is not who they think he is. Caroline turns to him and asks if he used any kind of magic. He only asks her not to call him Majesty there. She replies that in any case she makes a reservation and asks if he will not leave the castle disguised with magic and escape from his official duties. He answers that Christopher and the others will take care of it. He reaches out to her and says that today he wants to introduce Caroline to 4 sites of Lemuria. She looks at him surprised and blushes. Fantasy orchestral melody. They walk among the merchants of the city. They arrive at the museum. Hercules says that this is the first attraction he wanted to show her. Carlina is surprised and says there are so many works of art here. She asks what kind of place this is. Hercules proudly replies that he built it. She's shocked. He asks if she remembers when they opened the deposit during financial supervision. He says that at that time he was going to sell some surplus works of art to rebuild the treasure. But there were many things of high historical value and things that were too much to sell. He would have been cursed, as he believes, if he had sold these objects. He says there were so many of them that decided to put them on display here. She listens to him carefully and looks around. She stops at an item and asks if this vase was stored in a national warehouse. Hercules replies that this is the private property of an aristocrat. Originally, it was planned to display only objects of castle art, but the aristocrats insisted that they also wanted to show their wealth. Hercules says, with a smile, that they will charge a price for the place, and visitors will pay an entry fee. That way they'll make a lot of money. Hercules doesn't see any reaction from Caroline. Haunting, suspenseful fantasy melody. He gets outraged and looks at her, thinking that's not the reaction I expected. So that person shows up and says, that's true because women aren't interested in male vanity. Hercules faces her threateningly and tells her to stop appearing out of nowhere. She answers that she's just giving you some advice. She claims Carolina knows how to think, like everyone else. Looks like she hasn't grown enough to love art yet. Ask him if he should use something simpler. Hercules listens and begins to reflect on whether she really is interested in art. Hercules then decides to go to the next location. It says the next attraction is the street fair. He used to come here often. Everybody working hard, selling bread, washing things, separating grains from everything else. Caroline goes and talks with surprise that here is so excited. She's never been in a place like this before. Hercules says that since Lemuria was the capital of 2/3 of the world's wealth, there are always many different goods on the shelves here. In fact, as they had nothing to attract people, they decided to build a museum right next to the market. But on the other hand, they lure people to the market and buy various goods. He says there are also artisans here, so they can even make a souvenir with the name and date of it, even if it is not a coin. Carolina is genuinely surprised and happy. She goes and says it looks like this place got so excited thanks to Hercules. She agrees. He takes something, gives it to her, who asks what it is. It's some jewelry she's looking at. Epic and enchanting, orchestral melody. Hercules says aloud that Caroline's eyes are like rubies, and then claims they're even more beautiful than ruby. She blushes and says he's praising her. The boy says if she likes anything, let her know. He'll buy it for her. She refuses and says it's too much, so with shame, she says she doesn't have to. Gentle harp strumming since he was born in the Galliano family. His father, a military man, taught her only martial arts to protect Hercules. She smiles and says she's sure she wouldn't be okay with any of those necklaces if he gives them to her. Hercules then asks if it means that she does not want a reward from the emperor. Questioning whether she happens to have a boyfriend, there's an awkward silence. She says, in panic, that's not what she meant. Hercules laughs and asks why she just doesn't accept. He just wants to give her a gift. He says Carolina's very pretty. She'll be fine with anything. She gets even redder. She turns around and asks him not to provoke her anymore. He thinks proud, and with a smile, that's exactly what he wants. Carolina turns around and looks at the table with decorations. She notices a necklace. She looks at the table with decorations. She notices a necklace, a big, dark rock. Hercules realizes her reaction and asks if she likes anything. She goes out and says it's not like that. She doesn't like anything here. Hercules reflects that, given the circumstances, it is probably not worth showing an aqueduct under construction. A bridge structure with a canal to provide water through a canyon or river. The sink, corrected by Elderman Kua at Elderman. He reflects and understands what needs to be done. They look like horses run in competitions. Carolina's face is full of childish joy. She enjoys the carriage race. She really wanted to visit here. Hercules says she thought Caroline might like carriage races. She happily agrees and says everyone likes it. She says carriage racing is a test of the bond of trust between knight and horse. Horse against horse. Man against man in a battle heated by speed. Carolina says with confidence that there's no one who doesn't like it. She says enthusiastically that the red comet, Kinotus quadriga, is especially nice, dramatic, orchestral melody with rapid percussion, has a very popular jockey who's won many races since his debut. Hercules answers briefly that he understands. As a result, all the heroes in the race wave goodbye to the public. Caroline says, with a sigh, that today's race is over. Suddenly, all musicians start playing the trumpet. Emitting a sound, she turns her head and sees her father holding a tall handkerchief and then lowering it epically. Suddenly, people with horses enter the arena again at a huge and furious speed. Caroline looks all in shock. She doesn't understand what's going on. They decided to run 2 races. From the beginning, there was no one who wanted to run. From the beginning, she thought there was only one race. Hercules claims that they added more gates when they rebuilt the stadium. Caroline listens to him admire. He says that this stadium has been facing financial difficulties for a long time and was still suffering from lack of maintenance, so they decided to rebuild it according to a new project. Hercules, with complacency, claims that ultimately it is cheaper to rebuild it than to repair it. She interrupts him and screams at him to look at the red comet, Kinotus. Hercules is silent, and she screams that she's never seen him before in person. He reflects that if only he could hear a little more about what he did. He looks at Caroline, happy, and then smiles, thinking that actually, it's good, too. They leave the stadium. Caroline jumps for joy and says it was so great. She can't believe he went for it at the last minute. The red comet totally justified his name for her. Hercules, sadly, says she completely forgot him. At the end of the race, she bows to him and apologizes, saying she is very sorry. Hercules goes through it and says he knows it's late. But would she like to take a walk to the last place? She follows him and asks where to go. Hercules turns to her and replies smiling that they will go to sea. Caroline's face starts to get dark. Hercules doesn't understand what's going on. Isn't the sea a classic place to walk and date? She says she's never heard of such a thing. It says the sea is where the Lemuria sewer ends. It's the worst place you can go, and it stinks. Fantasy theme, with shimmering strings and gentle percussion. It's dirty, and it's just disgusting. Hercules understands that these places to date were chosen in the other world. He smiles and says it's okay. She keeps refusing. He pushes her and says it's okay. She won't give in and resist. When they reach the sea, he informs her about it, and she slowly opens her eyes. She looks at the vast sea, reflecting the rays of the sun. She watches everything with fascination. She looks around, and she's surprised to say there's no garbage here. Fantasy-themed music, and the water is so clean, and it doesn't stink. The port used to be full of fish residue, but now it's so clean. Hercules says it's all thanks to the law. He says that so far, all the sewers and garbage from New Lemuria were dumped into the sea. That's why the harbor was so dirty. Sometimes it caused epidemics. He says that's why he built it to solve this situation. It points to the building and immediately says it's a sewage treatment plant. It explains that this allows all New Lemuria wastewater to pass through a series of filters before being dumped into the sea. He says there's a law against throwing trash on the streets now. He says he's going to create a new function responsible for garbage collection and cleaning, and to avoid the garbage near the capital. He decided to dump all the garbage somewhere away from it. Carolina says she can't believe that he worked so hard and created a law to remove all the garbage. Is that really so necessary? Hercules approaches her and says yes. Pull it for yourself. And kisses on the forehead. Smiling says that, as you're going out for a date with someone you like, it would be nice if the streets were clean. It starts to turn red. The heat rises. He stretches his hands around her neck, puts them on her necklace, says the blue stone looks great with his red hair. She's surprised and says it's the same necklace. He says he thought she liked him when he was watching. He says it's good for her. She hesitates for a moment, and then thanks with a big smile. They remain for a long time without unnecessary movements, as if Hercules was expecting something. After a break, he openly says he wants her to reward him. She looks at him in panic, and he says he wants her to kiss him on the cheek as a sign of gratitude. He remembers he said he'd do anything he asked. He says that to this day, he has worked hard to make everything great. Hercules sees your reaction. He starts to wonder. I didn't want to ask much, but isn't it too early to ask her to kiss you? She cuddles to him, kisses him on the cheek, and says he did a very good job. Hercules is starting to blush, too. And he appreciates it. The demon witch shows up, and it says how hot it's getting in here. Hercules tells him to shut up. Caroline doesn't understand your reaction. At this moment, someone in the castle says he didn't see His Majesty. The other responds that he has a date with Lady Caroline today. Uncle and father are surprised. The priest says, with a heavy voice, that it's good to be interested in a girl. Christopher says she doesn't feel comfortable when she says that. The uncle says that D, who initially did not demonstrate initiative in his tasks and became idle, worked very hard until today, so that is normal, in your opinion. He just wanted to take a break from everything. He says with great tension and excitement, looking through all the documents. He claims that war can begin soon. They panic, and they say there's been some strange activity on the Persona Peninsula. There's no concrete evidence at the moment, but they can't just leave it as it is. Something needs to be done before things become problematic. We need to discuss everything with His Majesty. Fantasy-themed background music. They come in at the same time and ask if they can take up some of his time. They see the next scene in front of you. Hercules is lying on Caroline's lap, reading books, and she asks if it would be more convenient to read in a sitting position. Caroline gets scared when she sees her father, and they both scream scared. Orchestral fantasy theme. Hercules doesn't react at all. After the discussion, Hercules, still on Caroline's lap, asks if they really want to expand their troop. One says he should start with the naval forces. The other says he should pay attention to the army first. They look at each other angry. Hercules tells Caroline these old men scare him. and she says she's there with him. Hercules says that last year, most of his increased profits were spent on state companies. Water irrigation, reconstruction of military routes, aqueducts, public health promotion, and so on. If they do not strengthen the state base, it will simply be impossible to expand the army. He says the morale of the population should be adequate, but he himself planned to increase the military budget at the beginning of the year. Citizens must be ready to fight for their beautiful and comfortable country. Hercules says that, however, the army of this country is too weak and incredibly disorganized for restructuring. Those two look scared. Hercules says that, regardless of the differences between the races that are united by the peace treaty, they can simply ignore and begin to raise funds slowly on their own. He understands they need to strengthen their military forces, but their army is absolutely weak. Your uncle says that even with your words, you noticed a strange movement nearby. Hercules asks if they're really talking about the Personia Peninsula. He already knows. It says suspicious and unregistered transactions of wheat and iron guilds have been confirmed. In addition, consumers of traders and intermediaries everywhere report an abnormal increase in the number of mercenaries coming to them. And when Hercules tracked down the sources of all these changes, he realized that they were all related to the Personia Peninsula. He says those guys in Personia, I bet they think that as long as a child is on the throne, they'll destroy them. They have no idea of personal conflicts and consider it to be of no concern. Hercules leans back on the couch and says it's obvious that sooner or later they will be attacked. In fact, expanding this weak army will be a waste of money. He sighs and says how hard it is. Carolina answers him and addresses him. She says if the army of the Lemuria Empire gets stronger, she'll reward him. So Hercules immediately gets up and orders Galfus and Christopher to act, and then organizes a strategic conference. Christopher thinks how easy it is. Galfus listens and thinks that was what his daughter expected. Hercules informs everyone that there is still money left after the financial reform. At present, the army of the Lemuria Empire has about 20,000 heavy knights and longbow archers in total, with approximately 100 warships. The time has come to consider declaring war to conquer lost lands under the previous command. Hercules asks Galfisa how much more precisely they need reinforcements. He responds carefully that he would like to say that they still have enough capital, and he says they have a lot of cavalry, but he doesn't feel comfortable about it either. He answers that there are at least 10,000 infants, but if he could ask for more, then 20,000. Hercules warns you not to ask for more. They can't afford it. Galfus goes down. Thinking he's hopeless, Hercules turns to Christopher and asks what's happening to the fleet. He replies that he is still satisfied with the state of naval forces, but many vessels are already at the limit and need to be rebuilt. So if you cut the army costs, control over the sea will increase significantly. Hercules asks if he wants to maintain the status quo. Galfus says they haven't had naval battles in almost 20 years, and now they need an army. Christopher gets angry and asks what he's talking about. He shouts that if they lose control of the sea, they will not be able to defend the imperial capital. He says the fleet is more necessary. Galfus refuses and asks to strengthen the army. There's no need to worry about parasites. Hercules listens to them and reflects that their discussion is not unfounded, for his troops are not yet prepared to fight. Hercules claims they should get a little more attention and money. The military forces of the Lemuria Empire are divided into two parts: an army led by Galfus, and a fleet commanded by Christopher. First, Lemuria had a permanent army of 100,000 infantry soldiers. The cavalry was refueled with recruits or mercenaries from allied tribes. The main army was well trained and quickly adapted to any battlefield, which drove the expansion of the lands of the Lemurian Empire, when the previous army, under Hadrian III, ruled. Its number decreased significantly. It was discovered that he destroyed the entire infantry and formed an army based on heavy cavalry and archers, which were less flexible but used effectively in battle. Hercules thinks it was a wise decision to reorganize the army, using these soldiers as a sensitive substitute for horseback troops. During this period, the soldiers were composed of half peasants and half mercenaries of the allied tribes. And while there are poorly equipped men in your army who stood by yesterday, you simply cannot control the troops. The Lemurian army was powerful, but could only win once in a while, and Hadrian III continued to lose soldiers. While they had no chance of improving their capabilities, the number of lost battles grew. The money continued to be wasted on purchases of expensive horses and armor, and soon the Lemurian Empire was swamped in financial trouble. This is how the state of the kingdom's finances came to the present difficult situation. So Galfus and Christopher are arguing and cursing. Caroline turns around and asks, if elaborating the main army is difficult, then the mercenaries would not be a good option. Hercules thinks about it and comes to the conclusion that it would be difficult to deal with them. Mercenaries are soldiers who live for money. Even the Habsburgs of Spain, which have colonies in South America and made a fortune with large farms and silver mines, had their budgets completely drained to maintain the upper division of the third. Because of this, and also because of the lack of a regular army, some were betrayed and had a sad experience. Niccolò Machiavelli claims to be against an army of foreign mercenaries because they cannot be trusted. Hercules reflects that Tertio went from an army of mercenaries to a regular army, so they are different from the French reinforcements who betrayed Machiavelli. However, you can set the example of a Swiss mercenary who fought for France to the death. Another example is the French national wars. So it is impossible to confirm the evil intentions of mercenaries, as Machiavelli did. Hercules reflects that Machiavelli forced the mercenaries to go through many difficulties. Probably about a third of kingdom theories were based on personal reasons. Machiavelli did not stand out for military qualities. He starts by saying that, given how weak his military forces are, hiring mercenaries will only be like putting firewood on fire. He thinks it's worth focusing on strengthening the main army. Galfus agrees and says he's right. They won't trust mercenaries. Galfus claims most Navy mercenaries can't even ride a horse, which irritates Christopher. Christopher, in turn, says his ships are fragile. They've been mistreated by the thugs of his army, so now they'll have to rebuild them. They start swearing and screaming against each other again. Hercules says if they don't stop fighting immediately, he'll force them to kiss as the emperor's command. Everyone suddenly stops and sits down. Hercules says he looks great and calls them good boys. Hercules comments that they do not refuse the fleet. If they lose control, it would be difficult to restore it. So they hurry to build the ships. Christopher thanks you. He continues to say that as far as the army is concerned, it will be impossible to add another 10,000 knights, but he will be able to find about 3,000 soldiers. Galfus says it looks like the problem is in the army of 30,000 regular army sergeants. He asks if that's really normal. He replies that if there are only 30,000 soldiers, then yes, because there are always a constant number of subordinate officers. Hercules says, then leave him to himself, calling him General Galfus. He obeys and answers that it will be as he wishes. Christopher suggests dealing with those guys from Personia. Galfus adds that they're a bit troublesome. The mercenary corporation Personia rebelled against her master, the Emperor, 8 years ago. They are traitors who rebelled and stole the peninsula of Persona. They knew that the ruler was too concerned about the slow, heavy infantry and could not resist the light infantry. He thinks they'll use the same tactics. Caroline asks Hercules if he really means that they will invade their territory again, and he answers that it is not the case, that their scheme is probably made to make the young emperor suffer and steal the state's finances, because they themselves seem to be in a state of financial poverty. Hercules heard that farmers on the peninsula of Personia suffer greatly from high rates. Christopher and Galfus are beginning to understand who the enemy is here. Hercules says it all seems to depend on him. Fantasy theme music in the castle. While someone was cleaning, a certain beast man enters. He sees a woman and growls. He holds her tight, instilling fear, and says there is nothing to be afraid of because he is the king of this place. In another place, the same man asks a subordinate how many soldiers they assembled. It is reported that in addition to the 10,000 mercenaries, including 5,000 infantrymen and 5,000 bowshooters, they assembled 30,000 infantrymen and 5,000 light cavalry from various tribes. The man, hugging the girl, says it means they have 45,000 soldiers in all. He smiles and says it's not bad. At this moment, Hercules declares that the commander of the mercenaries of Personia, it's a black panther named Dalios,